The tragedy of Mick Jagger is that the world has never allowed him to stop. We remember the stage-shattering dance moves, the voice raspy as gravel, the energy of an 83-year-old man still making 60,000 people leap to their feet, and the image of a rock and roll icon seemingly immune to time. What we do not see is the man behind those stage lights who had to bury his first bandmate at just 26, who lost the woman he loved to suicide while he was halfway around the world, who lay on the operating table for a heart valve replacement at 75, and who looked over at the drummer's seat that had been familiar for 60 years only to find it occupied by someone else because Charlie Watts was gone. He performed after the death of Brian Jones, stepped onto the stage after Loren Scott hanged herself in her Manhattan apartment, and danced in front of tens of thousands only weeks after his heart valve was replaced, because the world had built him into an immortal icon, and an immortal icon is not allowed to collapse, not allowed to grow old, not allowed to hurt. But he has fallen, he is still hurting. The real question is not what Mick Jagger has done on stage, but how a man continues to set the world on fire when everyone he has ever loved disappears one by one. Before we step past the stage lights to find the real person who has survived it all, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like for Mick Jagger. Long before Barcelona, before the 80,000-seat stadiums, before England both imprisoned him and knighted him, there was only a middle-class boy in Dartford, Kent, who believed life had to hold something larger than what his parents had planned. Michael Philip Jagger was born on July 26, 1943, at Livingstone Community Hospital into a completely ordinary family. His father, Basil Fanshawe Jagger, was a physical education teacher and former gymnast who helped popularize basketball in England. His mother, Eva Ensley Mary, of Australian origin, was a hairdresser and an active member of the Conservative Party. There was no hidden tragedy in that house. No early dead father, no poverty, no childhood wound that forced the boy to seek refuge in music. The Jagger family was the embodiment of post-war British middle-class life, stable, respectable, and equipped with a clear roadmap for their children's future. Yet that perfect normality was precisely what young Mick could not endure. Then destiny appeared in the most mundane form possible, a suburban train platform in 1960. Jagger and Keith Richards had first met at age 4 at Dartford Maypole County Primary School, where they shared a love of rhythm and blues before losing touch after entering different secondary schools. But on an ordinary morning in 1960, on the Dartford platform, two teenagers happened to stand next to each other and recognized one another. Richards saw Jagger clutching under his arm blues records, Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, and in that moment both understood they were not alone in their craving to escape the life Dartford had mapped out for them. That chance reunion on a suburban platform would forever change the map of world music. But at the time it was simply two teenagers discovering they both loved the music no one around them understood. What sets Jagger's story apart from most music legends is that his original wound did not come from fate. It came from himself. Jagger passed 7 O-levels and 3 A-levels, was a genuinely outstanding student, and was accepted into the London School of Economics, one of the world's most prestigious economics schools, to study accounting and finance. The path lay carpeted before him: a degree, a stable job, an upper-middle-class life, and his parents' approval. He looked at that path and turned his back on it. In 1961, Jagger left the LSE to pursue music full-time. His father, the teacher who believed in discipline and education, could not hide his disappointment. But the son had already chosen. This was not a child robbed of childhood by circumstance. This was a child who with his own hands cut every safety rope the family had tied around him and stepped into a void no one in the Jagger line had ever known. That choice would give him everything: fame, fortune, legend, a knighthood. But it would also take everything: peace, stability, the ability to live an ordinary life, and the right to stop when exhausted. Jagger, Richards, and a young guitarist named Brian Jones moved into a shared flat on Edith Grove in Chelsea, London, a squalid, filthy place with almost no money, yet overflowing with American blues records by Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Robert Johnson. Those three young men did not know they were laying the foundation for one of the greatest bands in history. Between 1960 and 1962, the Rolling Stones took shape with Jagger on lead vocals and harmonica, Richards on guitar, Brian Jones on guitar, Bill Wyman on bass, and Charlie Watts on drums. 5 young men stood before a world that did not yet know who they were. Within 2 years, the Dartford Grammar School student would become the most dangerous man in British music. But the freedom he chased would prove harder to control than any blues riff he had ever learned. In 1964, the Rolling Stones released their self-titled debut album and immediately stormed the British market like a storm no one was prepared for. In 1965, The Last Time became their first UK #1 hit, but that was only a warning shot. When I Can't Get No Satisfaction blasted from every radio from London to New York, the Rolling Stones were no longer a band, they were a manifesto. If the Beatles were the nice boys' parents wanted their daughters to bring home, the Stones were the dangerous ones. Parents forbade their daughters even to mention. Jagger understood that and deliberately pushed the image to its extreme. Sex, rebellion, defiance, everything the opposite of the well-behaved Dartford Grammar School student he had once been. The physical education teacher's son was now the counter-cultural icon who made all of England both intoxicated and terrified. Yet what makes Jagger's soaring story different from any other legend is that glory and catastrophe never waited their turn. They always arrived together, twisted so tightly they could not be separated. In February 1967, just as the Stones stood at the peak of their cultural power, police raided Keith Richards' Redlands mansion in West Sussex. The raid was no accident. The tabloid news of the world had run a series titled Pop Stars and Drugs, aimed squarely at the Stones, and when Jagger sued the paper for libel, they retaliated by tipping off the police. That night, Jagger was charged with illegal possession of 4 amphetamine tablets. Richards was charged with allowing cannabis to be used in his home. And Marianne Faithfull, Jagger's girlfriend, then only 19, was found wearing nothing but a fur rug, an image that became the decade's emblem of scandal. The trial unfolded under frenzied media scrutiny. Jagger was fined £200 and sentenced to 3 months in prison. He was taken to Brixton Prison in South London. Richards received a 1-year sentence and was held at Wormwood Scrubs. Both were released on bail the next day. But the message from the British power structure was clear. We want to destroy you. What happened next, however, was something no one in that system foresaw. The Times, the most conservative, most prestigious newspaper in England, published its famous editorial, "Who Breaks a Butterfly on a Wheel?" condemning the sentences as unjust and baseless, and turning the trial into a symbol of the repression of individual freedom. Public opinion swung solidly behind Jagger. The sentences were overturned on appeal. The system had tried to crush the most rebellious voice in British music. Instead, it accidentally created an immortal. Brixton Prison did not destroy Mick Jagger. It completed him. The wound the system inflicted became the very armor he wore for the rest of his life. But the price of immortality is always paid by someone else. While the Stones were creating their greatest works, Sympathy for the Devil in 1968, Jimmy Shelter and the album Let It Bleed in 1969, Brian Jones, founding member and originally the real leader of the band, was collapsing. Heavy addiction had eroded Jones until he could no longer perform, and the band was forced to fire him. In July 1969, Brian Jones was found drowned in the swimming pool at his home. He was 27, one of the first members of the 27 Club the world would later name. Only 2 days after Jones's death, Jagger organized a memorial concert in Hyde Park before 250,000 to 500,000 people. He wore white, stood before the sea of humanity, read Shelley's Adonais in memory of the friend he had lost, then released thousands of white butterflies into the London sky. It was a moment beautiful enough to take the breath away, and also cruel enough to take the breath away, because it established a pattern that would repeat throughout Mick Jagger's life. Every time he lost someone he loved, he still had to step onto the stage. His private pain always became a public performance. Brian Jones was the first person Jagger lost, but he would not be the last. Then 5 months later, the very freedom Jagger had pursued all his life turned and bit him in the most brutal way. On December 6, 1969, the Rolling Stones held a free concert at the Altamont Speedway near San Francisco. Jagger announced the free show after being criticized for high ticket prices. wanting to bring the freedom he believed in to everyone. But the venue changed at the last minute, infrastructure was almost non-existent, and the Hells Angels were hired as security in exchange for beer. Violence erupted from the start of the day. Jagger was punched in the face the moment he stepped off the helicopter, and while the Stones were playing, right in front of him, an 18-year-old spectator named Meredith Hunter was stabbed to death by the Hells Angels just before the stage. Jagger tried to calm the crowd but was completely powerless. The man who wanted to bring freedom to the world had to stand and watch that freedom turn into chaos and death at his feet. Altamont did not end the 60s, but it ended the illusion that Mick Jagger or anyone could control the fire they had lit. After Altamont, any other band would have collapsed. A death in front of the stage, the media turning its back, the dream of the 60s reduced to ashes. That was reason enough for anyone to step down and never return. But Mick Jagger was not just anyone. He did not step down. He climbed higher. In 1971, the Rolling Stones released Sticky Fingers, the album that opened with Brown Sugar and contained Wild Horses, one of the greatest ballads in rock history. A year later, Exile on Main Saint appeared, recorded in the basement of Richards's villa in the south of France, while the entire band was tax exiled from England, and today it is regarded as one of the most perfect rock albums ever made. In the same period, the Tongue and Lips logo was born and quickly became one of the most famous logos in popular culture history, ranking alongside any brand symbol on the planet. Stones tours were no longer concerts. They became mega events, stadium-scale spectacles no one in the music industry had previously imagined. Jagger had invented the modern concept of the rock star, not merely a singer but a fashion icon, a sex icon, a rebellion icon, a freedom icon, all wrapped inside a lean body that danced as if gravity did not exist. And while Brian Jones already lay in the cold ground, while the ghost of Altamont had not yet faded, Jagger continued. He always continued. That was not courage in the way the world usually praises it. It was something deeper, more instinctive, and perhaps lonelier. A man who knew no other way to exist except to step onto a stage and set it on fire. Decade after decade, the Stones not only survived, they dominated. The 80s brought Start Me Up and ever larger stadiums. The 90s brought Voodoo Lounge and record-breaking tours. The 2000s brought the A Bigger Bang Tour with total grosses of $558 million, the highest-grossing concert tour in history at the time. The Rolling Stones became the only band in the world to place an album in the Billboard 200 Top 10 in every decade, from the 1960s through the 2020s. A record no one else, not even the Beatles, not even any artist who has ever lived, can touch. Yet the moment that truly defined Mick Jagger's peak did not lie on the charts or in the studio. It lay in Buckingham Palace in 2003 when Queen Elizabeth II knighted him for his contributions to music. He became Sir Mick Jagger. Pause for a second to feel the full weight of this paradox. In 1967, England imprisoned him for 4 pills. In 2003, England knighted him. The same country, the same institution, the same man. 36 years had changed everything. Not because Jagger changed, but because England finally had to admit it could not defeat him. They had tried to jail him, tried to crush him with the courts, tried to destroy him with the media, and all they achieved was to turn him into a legend larger than any institution. So in the end, instead of continuing the fight, they invited him into the palace and called him Sir. That was a standing ovation not from a stadium, but from an entire nation that had once regarded him as the enemy. Keith Richards never forgave that decision. He called accepting the title a compromise, a betrayal of the rock and roll spirit the two of them had built together. The relationship between Jagger and Richards, already a fragile mixture of brotherhood and subterranean rivalry, gained another crack neither side bothered to mend. But there is a small detail few mention. Jagger's father, Joe, the physical education teacher, the man who had once been disappointed when his son left the London School of Economics to chase music he did not understand, was still alive in 2003. Joe Jagger lived until 2006, dying at 93. He had lived long enough to see the son who once worried him become a knight of the United Kingdom. The Dartford Grammar School boy was now Sir, and the story does not stop there. In 2023, at the age of 80, Jagger and the Rolling Stones released Hackney Diamonds, their first studio album in 18 years, with appearances by Paul McCartney, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Lady Gaga. The album went to #1 in the UK and #3 in the US. In February 2025, Hackney Diamonds won the Grammy for Best Rock Album. the band's fourth Grammy in its history. At 81, Mick Jagger is not merely still alive. He is still winning, still creating, still making artists 40 years younger wonder how he does it. The fundamental difference between Jagger and almost every other legend is that he has no peak followed by decline. He has no golden age, then final years. His peak has lasted more than 6 decades and still shows no sign of ending. But that peak comes with a price no one among the 60,000 standing below the stage can see. Because Mick Jagger's immortality on stage has cast its longest black shadow over his private life, and that shadow is about to swallow the things he loves most. Jagger did not collapse because of his own mistakes. He did not collapse because of a lack of discipline, because of addiction, or because of some stupid decision in a foreign land. He collapsed because life itself is ruthless, and because every time life struck him down, the world still expected him to get up, smile, and walk out under the lights as if nothing had happened. The greatest, deepest, and most devastating loss in Mick Jagger's life had nothing to do with music. It came in March 2014, when he was halfway around the world in Australia, preparing to open the 14 On Fire tour with the Rolling Stones. Lauren Scott was not merely Mick Jagger's girlfriend. She was a renowned fashion designer, 6'3", a former model, who had designed costumes for Jagger's own tours and was fully respected in the fashion world independent of her famous partner's shadow. Nicole Kidman, Michelle Obama, Penelope Cruz, that was the caliber of her clients. Jagger and Scott had been together since around 2001, 13 years, the longest relationship in the life of a man famous for never staying in one place. Then on March 17, 2014, Lauren Scott found dead in her Manhattan apartment in New York. She had taken her own life. She was 49. Jagger received the news while on the other side of the planet. His spokesperson could only manage one sentence. He was completely shocked and devastated. The Rolling Stones canceled the entire Australian and New Zealand leg of the tour. On his personal website, Jagger wrote lines that anyone reading them could feel the pain tearing through every word. "I am still struggling to understand how my lover and best friend could end her life in such a tragic way. We spent many wonderful years together and had built a great life for ourselves. I will never forget her." He flew back to Los Angeles to be with his children. Karis, Elizabeth, Georgia May came to his side, surrounding him with the only love that could still reach him at that moment. At the time of her death, Scott's fashion company was approximately $5.9 million in debt. She left her entire $9 million estate to Jagger, not because he needed the money, but because she had no one else. A few months later, when answering questions on NBC's Today Show, Jagger spoke words whose true weight could only be felt by listening very carefully. "I'm okay. It's been very difficult. It's been a very hard year, but I've gotten through it by working, touring with the Stones in Europe and doing other things." He survived the greatest loss of his life, the only way he knew how, by returning to the stage. Not because he was strong, but because he did not know where else to go. The stage was both the antidote and the prison. He returned there not because he had healed, but because outside the stage, he had nowhere to set his pain down. If Lauren Scott's death was a blow to the soul, 5 years later, his body betrayed him as well. In 2019, at the age of 75, when the Rolling Stones were preparing for the No Filter North American tour, tickets sold out, schedule set, millions of people waiting, doctors discovered Jagger had aortic valve stenosis. His heart valve was hardening and narrowing, forcing the heart to work overtime just to pump enough blood through the body. The man who ran 8 miles a day, practiced yoga, meditated, ate scientifically, and had barely touched alcohol for 25 years, a body maintained like a perfect machine to serve the stage, was now being told that his heart was no longer functioning properly. In April 2019, Jagger underwent transcatheter aortic valve replacement surgery at a New York hospital. The entire tour was postponed. He wrote to fans, "I'm so sorry to have to postpone the tour, but I will be working as hard as I can to get back on stage as soon as possible." Read that sentence again. He had just had a heart valve replaced, and the first thing he thought about was not his health, but the stage. Less than a week after surgery, he posted a photo of himself walking in the park with the caption, "A walk in the park." A few weeks later, he posted a video of himself practicing intense dance moves in the gym. And when the No Filter Tour finally opened at Soldier Field in Chicago before 60,000 fans, Mick Jagger danced on stage as if the new heart valve were just another fashion accessory he had added to his collection. The 75-year-old body had betrayed him, and he had betrayed the body right back. That was both the most extraordinary victory of his life and the clearest proof that he truly could not stop even when his heart was begging him to. The question no one dared to ask out loud hung in the air. Had he kept himself healthy for decades because he loved life, or because the stage would not allow him to be sick? Then on August 24, 2021, the heartbeat of the Rolling Stones stopped. Charlie Watts, the band's drummer since 1963, the quietest, steadiest, least scandalous man in the entire group, died at the age of 80. Watts was not the most prominent member. He did not write the hits, did not make the front pages of the tabloids, did not have the romantic scandals. But he was the heartbeat, the pulse that kept the entire Rolling Stones machine running for nearly 6 decades. Jagger posted a photo of Watts smiling on social media and called him a wonderful friend. But the true meaning of this loss went far beyond friendship. Charlie Watts was the last companion from the near-original lineup of the band. Brian Jones had died in 1969. Bill Wyman left the band in 1993. Now Watts was gone too. When Jagger stepped onto the stage afterward and looked over at the drummer's seat, now occupied by Steve Jordan, he was looking into the empty space of 60 years of companionship erased. The stage lights were still on, the music still played, but something had been extinguished forever and could never be switched back on. Brian Jones in 1969, Altamont in 1969, Marianne Faithfull's miscarriage of the child who would have been his, Lauren Scott in 2014, the heart that needed a new valve in 2019, Charlie Watts in 2021. And after all of it, after every loss, Mick Jagger still stepped onto the stage, still danced, still sang, still burned. At 83, he is the last one still standing, and the curse of immortality is having to live long enough to bury everyone he has ever loved. But the stage only tells half the story. On the other side of the lights, there is a far more complicated world, a world not measured by sold-out tickets or packed stadiums, but by 8 children, 5 mothers, and a relationship that has lasted longer than all of them. In 1970, Mick Jagger had his first child, Karis Hunt Jagger, with American actress and Marsha Hunt. Their relationship was secret because when he began dating Hunt, Jagger was still involved with Marianne Faithfull. But what happened after Karis was born was the real wound. Jagger denied he was the father. He refused to acknowledge the child who carried his blood in order to avoid child support obligations, forcing Marsha Hunt to take him to court in a prolonged legal battle, simply to establish that Karis's father was indeed the most famous man in England. Feel the full weight of that paradox. This was a man whose name millions of people around the world screamed, worshipped, and paid hundreds of dollars just to stand a few dozen meters away from in a stadium. The stage gave him the unconditional love of the crowd every night. Yet he once could not give his own first child the simplest thing, the acknowledgement that she existed. This was not absence caused by busyness or difficult circumstances. This was deliberate denial. But Karis's story did not end in pain. Years later, Jagger and his daughter reconciled. Karis graduated from Yale University with a degree in history, became a film producer, and built a life of her own completely separate from her father's enormous shadow. In 2000, Mick Jagger himself walked Karis down the aisle on her wedding day. The man who had once denied her existence now holding her hand as they walked between the rows of seats. The journey from denial to atonement did not erase the wound, but it revealed a truth more complex than any hit he had ever written. That Mick Jagger is neither a monster nor a saint, but a man who learned to love far more slowly than he learned to run across a stage. Yet if Karis was the wound Jagger inflicted on himself, the relationship with Keith Richards is the wound both of them have inflicted on each other for more than 60 years without either side allowing it to heal. They met at age 4 at Dartford Primary School, reunited at 17 on a train platform, co-founded the Rolling Stones, co-wrote nearly every hit that redefined rock music, were arrested together at Redlands, stood together on the Hyde Park stage 2 days after Brian Jones's death, survived Altamont together, buried Charlie Watts together. More than 6 decades, longer than any of Jagger's marriages, longer than any romance he ever had, longer than the average lifespan of an ordinary person in many countries around the world. But that relationship has never been easy. Richards called Jagger a smart little mother, for a phrase that was both compliment and curse. Richards was furious when Jagger accepted the knighthood, regarding it as a betrayal of the rebellious spirit the two of them had built together. Jagger criticized Richards's heroin addiction in interviews, even though he himself had used heroin, a fact later revealed by former girlfriend Jerry Hall. In the 1980s, the two nearly fell apart completely when Jagger pursued a solo career, and Richards treated it as a profound personal betrayal. They hated each other. They hurt each other. They said things that could never be taken back in front of the entire world. But when Lauren Scott died, Keith Richards, the man who had called Jagger every ugly word in the English language, said, "Nobody saw this coming. Mick has always been my soul brother, and we love him. We're thick as thieves, and we're all hurting with him." And when Charlie Watts died, the two old men walked onto the stage together without the familiar drumbeat that had supported them for 60 years. The greatest paradox in Mick Jagger's private life is not that he has had too many women. It is that the longest, deepest, most defining relationship of his entire life, the relationship that has endured through every romance, every marriage, every child, every scandal, and every funeral, is the one with Keith Richards. He has been through 5 major relationships. One legal marriage to Bianca that she described as over the day of the wedding. 22 years with Jerry Hall, whose Hindu wedding in Bali was declared invalid by an English court. 13 years with Lauren Scott that ended in tragedy, and his current relationship with Melanie Hamrick, a ballet dancer 44 years younger, to whom he is engaged, but it remains unclear whether they will ever marry. Jagger once said his view of marriage was bohemian, and that marriage is not for me. But his behavior tells an entirely different story. Lauren Scott, 13 years. Jerry Hall, 22 years. Melanie Hamrick, more than 12 years and still going. That is not the behavior of someone afraid of love. That is the behavior of someone afraid of commitment, or perhaps afraid of loss. Because every time Mick Jagger has loved, he has lost. He lost Faithful because the two of them nearly destroyed each other with drugs. He lost Bianca because he himself could not be faithful. He lost Jerry Hall because he had a child with another woman. He lost Lauren Scott in the most brutal way a human being can lose a lover. And amid all those losses, there is one moment when time seemed to fold in the strangest way. In 2014, his granddaughter Assisi, daughter of Jade, gave birth to baby Ezra, making Jagger a great-grandfather. That same week, Jade herself gave birth to her son Ray. And only 2 years later, in 2016, Mick Jagger, by then already a great-grandfather, welcomed his own 8th child, Devereaux Octavian Basil Jagger, with Melanie Hamrick. He was 73. Hamrick was 29. Devereaux was born only 2 years after Lauren Scott's death, a child born from the ashes of loss. Proof that even at 73, even after the most devastating tragedy, the instinct to live and the instinct to create new life in Mick Jagger still refused to go out. A 73-year-old great-grandfather changing his newborn son's diapers while his great-granddaughter was learning to crawl somewhere else in the world. Time in Mick Jagger's life has never operated according to the order ordinary people understand. Hamrick has shared that she and Jagger are fantastic co-parents, that he is not an absent father, at least not with his youngest child. Perhaps he learned something from Karis, from 30 years of atonement, from the missed birthdays and the phone calls that were never made. Or perhaps Devereaux is simply the child he finally has enough time to love properly, because at 73 the stage no longer demands of him what it did when he was 27. 8 children, 5 mothers, and a heart that keeps beating not because it wants to, but because the stage demands that it must. Mick Jagger is not the perfect immortal icon the media has constructed for 6 decades, the ageless, painless, uncollapsible man who dances on stage as if time is something that only happens to other people. Nor is he the notorious womanizer, the serial scandal machine the tabloids paint to sell papers. 8 children with 5 women, drugs, prison, infidelity. A resume enough for 10 television series. He is a human being who has lived at the absolute extremes of human experience, and what makes his story so haunting is that those extremes never waited their turn. They always happened at the same time. He was knighted by the same country that once imprisoned him. He is the father of 8 children, yet once denied the first one. He lost the woman he loved to suicide, and 2 years later welcomed a new child into the world. He had heart valve surgery, and a few weeks later danced in front of 60,000 people, as if nothing had happened. He stood on stage with a new heart, looked over at the drummer's seat that Charlie Watts had left empty forever, and still sang as if that were the only thing keeping him upright, because perhaps it truly was. And at 83, the story is still not over. In 2023, at the age of 80, Jagger and the Rolling Stones released Hackney Diamonds, an album featuring Paul McCartney, Elton John, Stevie Wonder, and Lady Gaga. That went to #1 in the UK, #3 in the US, and won the Grammy for Best Rock Album in February 2025. Not a Lifetime Achievement Award, not a consolation prize. The award for Best Album. At 81, he was still beating people half a century younger. The 2024 Hackney Diamonds Tour, 19 shows across North America, ended just before his 81st birthday. He turned 83 in July 2026. Melanie Hamrick, the ballet dancer, fiancée, 44 years younger, is still by his side, engaged for several years, but it remains unclear whether a wedding will ever take place. Devereaux, the youngest son, nearly 10 years old, is growing up with a father in his 80s. Georgia May, his daughter with Jerry Hall, has just welcomed her first child. The next generation is stepping in while he still refuses to step out. Unlike almost every other legend, Jagger has no ending, no farewell show, no final moment on stage when the audience applauds, the lights go down, and everything becomes memory. He is still there, still running, still burning. Mick Jagger's true legacy does not lie in the number of Grammys he owns, the number of albums he has sold, the number of tours he has performed, or the Billboard records he has set. That legacy lives in every rock singer who has ever stood in front of a mirror and tried to imitate his signature sideways strut on stage. It lives in every garage band that ever believed rebellion was not a crime but an art form because the Rolling Stones proved it first. It lives in every artist of 40, 50, 60 who thought they were too old and then saw Jagger at 83 still dancing and told themselves, "I can still keep going." It lives in Maroon 5's song, Proves Like Jagger, proof that a generation that never set foot in a Rolling Stones concert still knows his name, still understands what he stands for, still uses his name as a common noun for the human body's defiance of time. He turned music into something dangerous, physical, and closer to survival than any other form of entertainment. He did not make the world feel lighter. He made the world feel more alive, more intense, more real, and more painful. Through all the dazzling peaks, the heartbreaking losses, the irreparable mistakes, and the merciless ravages of time, the fire he lit on that first night on a London stage more than 60 years ago has still not gone out. It has burned many things. It has burned the people he loved. It has every previous version of himself. But it still burns. At 83, Mick Jagger is still standing on that stage, still walking, still burning. The question is no longer whether he can continue. The question is whether anyone, including himself, has ever truly known what will happen when the stage lights finally go out. When you think of Mick Jagger, what is the first thing that comes into your head? Is it the voice, the dance moves, the fire? Or is it the man who is still standing when everyone around him has fallen? Share your favorite memory in the comments below and join us in honoring the man who refused to leave the stage. If Mick Jagger's story made you feel something, please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories we will tell. Thank you for staying until the very end. See you in the next video.